Welcome back to The Report. We are shifting gears to the fields of engineering and mathematics as we explore the intricate mechanisms behind avian flight. The research that we're looking at tonight was actually published last June by scientists from Roskilde University in Denmark. Now, using data from birds, insects, and bats, they were able to derive a universal formula correlating a creature's wing-fin oscillation frequency with its body mass and its wing area. Now, those findings actually highlight the existence of a universal design blueprint that can be seen across a diverse spectrum of winged creatures. To help flesh out the research further, I'm pleased to welcome Professor Andy McIntosh. Dr. McIntosh holds an emeritus chair in thermodynamics at the University of Leeds and is an adjunct professor of engineering at Liberty University in Virginia. Now, over the past 40 years, Professor McIntosh has dedicated his career to researching and lecturing on mathematics, combustion, and aeronautics, writing over 200 academic papers in addition to numerous books. I've had him as a guest on my programs a number of times, all the way from across the pond. Dr. McIntosh, welcome to The Report.
Very good to be with you again, David.
It is great to have you on. Andy, to start off with, could you just explain briefly the fundamental principles of how birds can fly?
Well, you've got the Wright brothers, right, who proved that by copying birds, they could actually make a heavier than air machine with engines, of course, and that was 17th of December 1903. And they were copying the birds. Birds basically do the same. You've got a picture here of a wing for birds, but of course their wing is made of feathers. Unlike if you go back to the Wright brothers, when the Wright brothers did all their work, they were making a wing of canvas. But frankly, the birds do it far better. Here's a kingfisher taking off from the water. And it's showing superb aeronautics. That's a small bird. It's a European kingfisher. But if you look at an eagle, right, birds are actually curving their wings by operating muscles to change the shape of their wings. Wow. Very similar to what the Wright brothers, of course, did. But no longer do aircraft do that. They don't use canvas over a wooden frame. They, of course, change the shape in a rather crude way. It works by putting flaps and forward flaps down. So basically, everything comes down to the ability, David, to change the shape of the wing. And that's what birds do superbly.
They do. And of course, we've been able to make mechanisms, flaps, in order to sort of change the position on some areas, right? But at the same time, feathers are so much more well designed. When you think about the way a feather is designed and then the individual muscles that allow birds to adjust those feathers so you get just the perfect amount of lift or whatever it might be. Talk about their hook and loop design. Talk about the way that feathers are put together, which makes them both aerodynamic, many times waterproof and windproof so that they can generate lift.
Yeah, maybe you could put up the slide I've got of that system where you've got the barbs coming from the rachis, and in my screen, I'm actually showing you this is a flight feather from a buzzard. Exactly the same principle as what I've just shown you, but I'm going to show you dynamically. If I separate the barbs on this feather, right, you can see that I've separated it. I'll just hold it up a bit higher so you can see. Now, if I put my finger and my thumb over it, I can make those barbs come together, right? Now, I love to say this to children, by the way. I love getting the children up to show them this. It looks like magic, but what's really happening is that you've got the barbs coming out, which I just showed you for a buzzard feather. And in between the barbs, David, you've got barbules. And this is the important point. On my picture, as you come down from the stem, or we call it the rachis, left-handed barbules on that picture are hooked. Right-handed barbules coming from adjacent barb have ridges on. So you've got something like Velcro here. You've got the hooks sliding over the ridges, which means that adjacent barbs, like I'm showing you on this feather here, adjacent barbs are actually made to hook together, which is frankly astonishing, because it means that on my earlier picture, left-handed barbules, the mini barbs as it were, have to have hooks on, and right-handed barbules have to have ridges on.
Yeah.
There's no way evolution could have designed that.
Absolutely. This study, I've got something printed out from phys.org. It talks about flapping frequencies of birds, insects, bats, and whales predicted with just body mass and wing area. Now, I'm going to go through a few things, and I want you to comment on it. When I see the words predicted, it means that for something to be predictable, it needs to be organized, it needs to be orderly, it needs to point towards an engineer. They speak about a natural resonance frequency. Natural, which means that it's working with physics, but then where did the physics come from in the first place? They talk about plotting predictions on a graph, and it is so remarkably close to the line that they were expecting. They mention that this frequency shows little variation despite, and I'm going to use that word, I'm going to highlight it very carefully, despite huge differences in their evolutionary history. In other words, even though these things must have evolved over long periods of time and they have complete separate histories between birds and insects and other flying things and all of that, somehow it just all seems to fit. Talk about this study for a moment.
Well, that then means that what they're showing is that for any weight of a creature, it needs a certain lift. So if you've got tiny insect, obviously it doesn't need a huge amount of lift, but it needs to be linked with the area of its wings. So there'll be a relationship between the weight and the area of the wings that they've got and the lift that, of course, that they achieve. And this is well known. It's an aeronautical principle that the coefficient of lift, we call it, is the coefficient is the lift force divided, or lift times the area of the wing divided by a half rho v squared times, it's the lift force divided by a half rho v squared times the area. So obviously, if you're traveling at a lower speed, everything is actually in a lower lift condition, but the coefficient of lift must always be roughly the same for the same speed. So that's really what that piece of work will be showing. And you can almost predict, because of the design features of wings, what the lift necessary for a particular creature of a particular weight is going to be, because you know roughly what speed it's going to be flying at.
And
so
that's design again.
Really what that paper will be doing.
Yeah, it's all pointing towards design and the idea that if things are orderly, then we will see patterns even across multiple different types of animals, whether it's an insect or a bird or even the fin of an animal underwater. Lastly, I just want you to spend a couple of seconds, given your research in flight mechanics and design and flapping micro air vehicles and all of these things that you have been researching over the years in the thermodynamics of things like different insects, all of the things that you've been able to study, what should we take away from the design we see within avian creatures?
I think the biggest feature is what I've just said about the way feathers hang together. Yeah. But I could say other things. The breathing mechanism of birds is absolutely staggering. It's a two-stroke breathing system. They take two breathings in and out to get one packet of air round their air sacs and then coming through the lung. It's a continuous flow lung. It's utterly remarkable. Reptiles and mammals don't have that. they also have a supracoracoideus muscle, which is an extra muscle for pulling up the wing. And that muscle is absolutely essential for taking off from ground.
100%.
We've talked about migration. That's yet another feature which I could talk to you for an hour on, but I won't now.
I would love to have you back to discuss some of these things in greater detail.
I would love to come. I'd be happy to do so.
Dr. Andy McIntosh, thank you so much for joining us today.
Lovely to talk to you again.
Yes, sir. Well, we've heard from the expert. Now, it is your chance to weigh in. Viewer voices are coming up right after the break.